Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to all the participants and to our panelists, whom I will introduce in a short time. This is the third webinar, the third of three webinars, and the last one. The title of this webinar is Integral Ecology and the Working Future, Reimagining University Education. My name is Roberto Maier. I'm moderating this webinar from the Catholic University of Italy in Milan. This webinar is available in two languages, English and Spanish. You can see a globe button in the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen. There, you can choose either Spanish or English for the translation. All the participants are invited to pose questions and comments during the webinar. You can use the Q&A button in the Zoom toolbar. This webinar is organized by SACRU Alliance. SACRU is an international alliance of Catholic research universities composed of 8 institutions: the Australian Catholic University, the Boston College in the United States, the Pontifical Catholic University of Chile, the Pontifical Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro, Sofia University in Japan, the Catholic University in Portugal, Sacred Heart Catholic University of Italy, and Ramon Llull University in Spain. In this series of webinars, we have posed the same 4 questions to all our panelists. The main goal of this webinar is to follow the inspiration of the encyclical letter Laudato Si, on care for our common home, focusing on university and how we have been called by this economical, social, and ecological crisis, the role of the university, and the need to work within the academics to a systemic solution. This webinar is on Zoom, and it is also recorded and made available on YouTube platform. It is proposed to students, to researchers, or to the whole public, hoping that will be able to inspire and open new questions. So feel free to share the recording in the future. Let me first of all introduce you Lilian Ferrer. Lilian is Vice President for International Affairs in the Pontifical University, Catholic University of Chile, and she is member of the SACRU Executive Committee. So welcome, Lilian, and I leave the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Roberto. It is such a pleasure to be here. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to each of the participants who are on this occasion in the third version of our webinar series, Integral Ecology and the Future of Work, Reimagining University Education. This is the challenge that we are all confronting at the moment, particularly considering a pandemic that we are all living at the moment. Along with thanking our SACRU network for the opportunity to carry out this webinar that covers topics of global impact, I would also like to thank the participation of Father Josh Kurithadam, Coordinator of Ecology and Creation of the Vatican Dicastery, for promoting integral human development, and Dr. Tara Pisani, Associate Professor of the Practice and Director of the Environmental Studies Program from Boston College. As part of working group number 2 of the SACRU network, we are committed in that expansion of knowledge and challenges and channels of action have a direct influence in the construction of a better world. And we are totally committed as a working group to strengthen our Catholic identity and follow the message of our Pope in terms of following Laudato Si principles. We know that to have a global impact that generates global changes in favor of humanity and the world, international collaboration is necessary. Our SACRA Alliance is committed to create solutions to existing problems that increasingly, at this point in history, have a global impact. We believe that the focus of our mission is to promote the knowledge that lies among our universities for the common good of society, in which this collaboration contributes to crossing the existing barriers in favor of the common good. Restoring the nature we had damaged means, in the first place, restoring ourselves. Let us be compassionate, creative, and courageous. May we take our proper place as a restoration generation. This is the invitation of Pope Francis on the launching of the United Nations Decade. This youth-led movement shows the power of an environmentally savvy generation to bring about real, concrete change towards a healthy planet. Let's be part of the solution. Let's deliver our knowledge in pursuit of a healthier planet. So thank you so much to our guest speakers today, and thank you so much to all the team that have been organizing these webinars. This is our last webinar, but I'm really looking forward to organize more. We definitely need to keep moving in this direction of building a better world. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lilian, for your encouragement. And I'd like now to introduce you the two panelists of today's webinar, which is the last webinar. We have gathered a lot of rich inspirations in the first two webinars. And probably today we will have a more universal, so to speak, glance. First of all, because of our panelists. Let me introduce them, first of all. Tara Pisani-Garot, she's the director of Boston College Environmental Studies Program and an associate professor of the Practicing the Earth and Environmental Sciences Department. Tara is an agroecologist. She does research in the areas of conservation, biological control, wild bee pollination services, arthropod community diversity, and the interactions between climate and agriculture. Her research is motivated by the vision to redesign agricultural systems to be sustainably productive for equitable human health, while conserving biodiversity, storing carbon in water, and preserving our wild ecosystems. Tara teaches courses in agroecology, ecology, sustainable agriculture, climate change, and environmental seminars, and uses the campus as a living laboratory for inquiry-based learning. Father Jostrom Kuritadam, he's the coordinator of the sector of ecology at the Vatican Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. He's also chair of Philosophy of Science and director of the Institute of Social and Political Sciences at the Salesian Pontifical University in Rome. Father Josh's double passion is to pass on to younger generation not only a sense of awe and wonder before the grandeur and majesty of the universe, but also a deep sense of concern for the increasingly precarious state of our common planetary home. Father Jostrom has been particularly associated with the study and diffusion of the Laudato Si, Pope Francis' encyclical letter on care for our common home. His most recent publications include Creation in Crisis, Science, Ethics, and Theology, 2014, The Philosophical Roots of the Ecological Crisis in 2017, and The 10 Green Commandments of the Laudato Si in 2019. So first of all, I will ask to our guests to react to this paragraph, which introduces our webinars, all the 3 webinars. I will read it shortly, and I will leave the floor to Father Jostrom and then to Tara. So higher education around the world is at an inflection point. The ongoing impact of COVID, along with broader technological, demographic, and political shifts, have accelerated the need to rethink the role and nature of university. This kind of transformation transcends discussions of research, curriculum, learning delivery, or student support. It goes beyond questions of operational models and operational capacity. It invites us to think about how we can do better things, not simply how we can do things better. This series of webinars is thus focused on an exploration of the most profound questions of meaning at a university, and with that, the very meaning of university itself. So, Father Jostrom, first of all, how do you react to this statement?
Thank you very much, Roberto, and thanks also to Lilian for the kind words from both of you. And on behalf of the Vatican Dicastery, thank you very much for inviting us to join the Sacro webinar, and delighted that you have chosen Laudato Si as the focus, the main theme of this series of webinars. Now, responding to this very well-crafted paragraph that you read for us, I would say very briefly three things. First of all, as all of us know, COVID has allowed us, or rather pushed us into a crisis. I mean, we just went on that we could, with the things we were doing, like we had planned lots of things, and also it put in crisis our way of living, which was separated. Academic was one world, economy was another world, health was another world, ecology was another world, natural world, another sector, development could carry on. And COVID has struck at all these sort of certainties that we had, that we realized as the United Nations Environment Program director put it so clearly: if the planet is not healthy, we cannot be healthy. That if people are not healthy, we cannot have jobs. And if we cannot have jobs, families are going to suffer. All these are connected. But my vision of COVID is also positive in as much as I think it's like in every crisis, as the Greeks used to say, crisis. Every crisis is an opportunity. And I think this is the moment that we are having to regenerate, as Lilian was saying, quoting Pope Francis, that we could be the generation of regeneration. So my evaluation of the situation is positive in that sense, in as much as we can make the best out of it. As Pope Francis says, there's nothing worse than a crisis than wasting the opportunity of restarting. So this is my first reflection. Second is, what can universities do? You end the paragraph with that. And from this morning, I've been thinking of our webinar, and I was thinking, in all important moments, humanity was led by academics or people who could think of Plato's academy that formed generations of thinkers, or Aristotle's Lyceum. Or in the medieval times, we had the medieval universities, which are, as we know, Oxford began as a medieval center of learning. Also Cambridge and Sorbonne in Paris was 1006 to 1025, 1015. Those are the dates, all in the 12th century. And their universities were really guiding the society. And we have seen it every epoch, also in modernity, probably in our own times. I think universities have lost because we have gotten too much into specialization. And that takes me to the third point. What can Laudato Si offer in this context of providing a vision? Universities, a student went to Sorbonne would study politics, but also theology, but also philosophy, all these sciences put together. Whereas today we have become very specialized. And that's where I think Laudato Si's vision of integral ecology can help. That once again, and I began saying that COVID exposed the defaults or the fault lines of a society of separation. Whereas university's vocation is to offer a holistic vision. And that's what probably Laudato Si is offering us. an integral vision. There again, I will say two things. Again, stressing on what universities could do. Laudato Si has a beautiful third chapter entitled The Human Roots of the Crisis, that we need to analyze, go deeper, look at the roots. I think of Gautama Buddha in India, who faced with suffering, he asked him, what are the roots? What's the cause of suffering? And I would see that as a very unique contribution that universities can make. Analyze, find out the roots. Then the second part is more, can make proposals of an integral ecological vision, where again, we bring together ecology, economy, sciences, spirituality, education. And I conclude, what a better place other than university is there to realize that integral ecological vision that we need so much today. I hope I'm taken too long, Roberto. So this very simple 3 reflections.
Thank you very much. It was very clear. And now I would ask to Tara to react to the same statement. Thank you, Tara.
Well, thank you so much, Roberto, Lillian, Roman, for organizing this webinar series and for moderating it. And thank you so much for Father Joshram for sharing this webinar space with me. I feel quite honored and humbled to be engaging in this topic with you. And it's a real pleasure to be talking specifically on integral ecology as an ecologist. I thought in reading Laudato Si in 2015 that one of the most groundbreaking radical concepts in Laudato Si was this idea of using an integral ecology approach to solving our social and ecological crises. And by integral ecology, we're understanding that humans are interconnected to each other and to everything else in the ecosystem, and that our non-human species are part of that. They are, as Saint Francis of Assisi says, our brothers and sisters. I found in reading Laudato Si great joy as a Catholic ecologist in understanding more of the Bible's texts and how we have relationships with non-human species. And that's been very helpful for me personally in thinking about integral ecology. And at the same time, I'm also deeply concerned today in 2021 that as a society, we have not made the ecological conversion fast enough to meet the challenges of our time. And in 2019, people might remember there was a report that was put out by the Intergovernmental Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. And it was an assessment of our global biodiversity and the regulatory services. And the messages were very sobering for us. We've learned that about 25% of the assessed plant and animal species are declining around the world. And that means that 1 million species are likely to go extinct in just the coming decades. Also, what was striking to me in that report, they list a number of regulating ecosystem services like pollination services, seed dispersal of plants, that's so important for plant regeneration, air purification, water filtration, climate regulation, soil regeneration. All of these things the majority are declining globally, and that weakens our support system for human life on the planet. A scientist who lives in my neck of the woods, Edward O. Wilson, he wrote a book called Half Earth. And in that, he suggests that we conserve half of our land and half of our sea to wild species that we share the planet with. And if we do that, we'll conserve 85% of the species that exist on the planet today. So how are we doing with that? Well, according to the UN Environment Program, we're at 15% of conservation for our land and we're at 7.6% conservation for RC. So we have a lot to do to get to 50% or close to it in order to conserve the beautiful life that's on our planet. I'm given constant hope as I go outside and I explore the ecosystems in my area, that we still have a lot to cherish and to preserve. It's not too late. So what role then do Catholic universities play in this ecological crisis? I think that one way to start, and I just want to build on what's been said, one way to start would be by including care of God's creation in the strategic planning for Catholic universities. Then we preserve green spaces on our campus. We use that strategic direction to make some decisive decisions and changes. So we conserve and preserve green spaces on campus, and I'm not including our artificial turf as part of that green space. I'm thinking green spaces that photosynthesize, take in carbon from the air, and release oxygen and improve air quality. But the part of the paragraph says that, you know, we need to move from doing things, just doing things better, to doing better things. So if we really want to do it better, we should restore some of those green spaces into the native habitat of our regions. And that for many places would be restoring a lawn to a meadow, or maybe to a wetland. And if we're in a forested region, to a forest system. Plant some trees and let nature take its course, and let's take a back seat and appreciate God's creation. Let God have its way. And if we need some more justification for this, in Laudato Si, Pope Francis makes it very clear that this is part of our Catholic identity. He says, living our vocation to be protectors of God's handiwork is essential to a life of virtue. It's not an optional or a secondary aspect of our Christian experience. We have to do it. So also, I think for society to make that ecological conversion that Pope Francis is asking for us, it's important that we shift some of our focus from the virtual spaces and social media and our phones towards the natural world around us. It's striking today that college students will be more likely to be able to list and recognize brand labels and associate them with the company than they will be able to identify trees on their campus, just trees in the common trees. We need to do a lot more to learn about the wild species that we share our planet with. And like Dr. Tucker said in the last webinar, we know that college students are experiencing higher rates of depression and anxiety, and spending time in natural places, communing like St. Francis of Assisi with brothers and sisters from the wild world, this has immense social, spiritual, psychological, and physical health benefits for us. So this is a type of measure that we can do that's only going to help our students. And so another sort of aspect, we could also, in helping to teach students about other life forms, we could have arboretums. This would be a little bit more managed space than a restored forest, where we have signage and that explains the names, the scientific names, the common names, the life history, so forth. We could have botanical gardens that also do something the same. And when we learn about other species, when we understand how they make a living in the world and how they relate to us, then we can bring that awareness, I think, into our everyday actions. It changes the way we walk about and exist in the world. So in Laudato Si, in referring to St. Francis of Assisi, Pope Francis writes, and I think this is pretty profound, if we feel intimately united with all that exists, then sobriety and care will well up spontaneously. And I'll end right there.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you very much, Tara, and thank you, Father Josh from in your words and voices, we hear frequencies of practical problems and of the full frame. We hear promise and emergency together. And I think it's very inspiring for us to listen to your different points of view and voices. Now, I'd like to ask you closer to the present situation we are experimenting during this pandemic, and amidst many other challenges that we face as global citizens, the ecological crisis, for example. What is the specific role of university? I think we are talking about university as communities, not only students or academics, but the whole staff made of students, administrators, and academics, the community of the university. So if you can answer to me, maybe Tara, you can start if you were already speaking about university.
Sure. Thank you so much. This is a really good question. And I want to start by agreeing with what Father Josh said, in that one of the, I think, principal roles of the university is in understanding our crises and understanding the root causes, using multiple disciplines to inspect those crises. In thinking about COVID-19, we had a lot to learn about how COVID-19 spread from person to person and the conditions of spread and how it affected our bodies. And we went from maybe thinking it was something of a more severe flu to understanding that it had much greater consequences to our physical health. It's almost surprising to think that when it all started, we didn't really have a good understanding that the 3 simple measures of wearing a mask, keeping social distance, and improving sanitation practices would essentially stop the spread of the virus. It took us a long time to learn it, and there was obviously in the United States and other countries a lot of politicization of those measures. And so I think maybe in hindsight, the university could have done a better job in communicating the science behind the virus spread. I think we did a very good job at that within our university, but I think we need to probably do more to get information out to the public, and so that people can have faith in the science that's being generated, and to have some understanding of the effects of our different decisions. Secondly, I think we need, as a university, to engage in ongoing dialogue about these crises and their solutions. And I think we need to do this both within the universities, our universities, with our staff, with our students, across the university, across disciplines, but also with our broader communities. So including the community that we're each situated in, and our larger communities like this one, just like we're doing today. And I feel like that's something that we need to constantly be doing. Lillian said that in the very beginning. This is the end of the 3rd series for this webinar, but we are going to continue the conversation. And thirdly, I think at the foundation is to capacitate students to courageously approach and solve these crises, or parts of the system that contribute to the crises. And we need to nurture their curiosity and their critical thinking skills. And I also think that we need to be inclusive of multiple perspectives, knowledges, and cultural experiences.
Please, Father Jostrom.
Yeah, thank you, and happy to build on what Tara just shared. I would say, from my perspective, also based on Laudato Si, the response of the universities could follow the path of See, Judge, Act. And as you know, Laudato Si, the 6 chapters are built around these 3 phases: seeing, judging, and acting. Seeing, I would say, again, I'm sure Tara will be happy. One of my favorite, things I learned from Edward O. Wilson, I forget which book, The Diversity of Life, in which he says he has taught over 40 years. So he was asked, and he was very much appreciated as a professor. So what is the secret? And he said, it's true that I teach on ants and, very specific objects. But he said, I always begin with the big picture. and something that motivates the students, see the entire picture to get the big picture, he says. Then I go to particulars, and students fall in love with the big picture. When I teach cosmology, my first lesson is about supernova. And we exist, all the atoms in our bodies are there thanks to supernova. And I found that really excites them. So then we can go to relativity and quantum mechanics afterwards. But then the big picture is important. And that's what Laudato Si does. In the very first chapter, when Pope Francis it puts the question, so also the title of the chapter, what is happening to our common home? It's an ecological crisis, and oikos, logos, as we know. And we take it for granted that we know what ecology is, but then if you are to really accept it, it is the crisis of our common home. And if my house is on fire, I won't, go for my coffee and tea and then sit down. Okay, what can I do? Go to the library. We will be on fire. I mean, we'll do everything possible to save our common home. And I think that is what universities should begin, showing the students the gravity of the crisis. Our common home is crumbling down around us. So that is a seeing. And as Tara already mentioned, Catholic universities have something more, even a deeper perspective. And there again, I quote another book of Edward Wilson, 2006, Creation, an appeal to save life on earth. Now he's a scientist, I'm addressing to faith leaders. And Laudato Si was a response to him and to many other scientists who were writing, asking faith leaders. And I remember 2014, a group of scientists in Nature writing to Pope Francis, we need your voice. And in the Nature magazine, the most prestigious scientific magazine. And because scientists say, you people see creation, earth as God's creation. It's something sacred. It's not something we can buy and sell. It has been entrusted to us, as we know. The Genesis 2:15, the very first commandment given to humanity is to cultivate and take care of this garden. So I insist on this. We need to show to our students, the universities need to show that it's an ecological crisis, really see the crisis. Then the second point is judging. And I already mentioned that, and Tara also picked up on that, how it's important to go to the roots of the crisis. Otherwise, we are addressing symptoms. We make patch of that, but the problem on like cancer, if you have cancer, it's not sufficient to take paracetamol because you run fever or you have cough. You really need to go to the roots. And that's where I think universities also, we need to say mea culpa. I think it's David Orr, I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, one of the best environmental educationalists. And David Orr says, those who are destroying the planet are not the poor indigenous communities or farmers in the global south. Most of them are managers who have come out from the best of our universities, from the best of our business schools, from top-notch universities, because we have given them the wrong education. So we need to really rethink our curricula, and this is all part of identifying the roots. So judging is so important. Then, as Tara also mentioned, acting. We need to act, and there again, I would very much see the protagonism of students, and thank God that's happening. I wish it was a little more the I see it, say it also as a university professor myself. Because on the climate crisis or biotype, who are the ones who came down onto the streets and squares? Children, school children, youth, but then mostly teenagers or university students were missing. And I would say the fault is mine and yours as university professors. We are not motivating our students. In the early 70s or late 60s, the students were at the forefront of the revolution against the Vietnamese War and the first Environment Day, in 1970, we had, 5 million or 50 million people gathered, and all led by students and universities. So I really wish that we need to make the young people protagonists and work and together as a university community motivate. And we need to be there much more actively on the ground as a university community, also at the level of action and also activism Yeah, so just to sum it up, seeing, judging, acting, which is at the core of Laudato Si, can be very well applied in this context of the mission of the universities to respond to the ecological crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Jostrom. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Tara, because you gave us the evidence that this crisis can also be a regeneration, as Father Jostrom was saying in the beginning. And thank you, Father Jostrom, for reminding us that we judge reality, but also reality judges our actions. And so I'd like to pose you another question about the future. Future is an important word for any religion, but also for any secular person. So now, rather than prepare for the future, how are you seeing universities prepare the future? And so, since you were talking about the judgment of a university, I will start from you, Father Jostrom. Thank you. Please.
Yeah. Thank you, Roberto. And I'm so personally so delighted that you used the expression, prepare the future. You know, when the COVID-19 Commission was created, Vatican has a COVID-19 Commission created by Pope Francis. And when the Commission met with Pope Francis, we are partners from all over the world, hundreds of them. But the core team is at the Vatican. And he told us, don't wait for the future, prepare the future. So that was his expression. I don't know if you took it from him or it's very common now, but he was one of the first people to use that expression, prepare the future. And I would say that's so important. Now there again, I would see a specific role for us as universities to provide the vision. Now people will go future. We need to envisage the future. Then the future will happen. And I think of, I'm sorry, as a priest, but quoting someone like Karl Marx, you know, I'm a philosopher myself. And as a student, I was disturbed by his criticism of philosophers. He said, philosophers only interpret the world. The important thing is to change the world. Then I found Marx spent most of his life at the British Library in London, at the library, researching. And that's Capital and all this are published thanks to years of research, because he provided a vision, and communism or all the rest followed. And I think every movement, I think of Mahatma Gandhi or Pope Francis himself, but Laudato Si is ultimately a vision. So I think it's important to prepare the future. We need to visualize the future and have a vision which can inspire people. And Nelson Mandela, I think of Martin Luther's King's famous speech, I have a dream, and vision is, in other words, a dream. So unless we have a dream, we dream the future won't happen the way we would like the future to happen. So I would just emphasize on this element as universities really provide a vision, as Tara said, based on, they like the point we made a couple of times, Tara, of multidisciplinary, that's again very much Laudato Si, a vision based on economics, a vision based on ecology and sciences and theology and spirituality, all these dimensions, and also indigenous wisdom. As all of us know, I just want to quote in this context that 80% of biodiversity is protected by the indigenous communities around the world, who form hardly 4 to 5% of humanity. So their wisdom is so crucial at this moment. Their languages, their culture, and so we need everyone. Earth is our common home. So this is the first one. And if I might say one more element, Laudato Si has this beautiful subtitle called Care. Care for our common home. And I think care is it's such a beautiful word that we have depreciated. I think the best of humanity comes in caring. A mother cares for her children. And when we really love each other, we care. And I would also like to connect it to Fratelli Tutti, the other encyclical of Pope Francis. And Rowan Williams, the former Canterbury Archbishop, writing on Laudato Si, one of his articles, he says, when we care, we become more godlike. God is one who cared for the Garden of Eden, continues to care for us. So it's not when we dominate or when we exploit that we become diabolic then, not godlike. God's nature is to care. And I think what we teach in the universities, we need to bring in more care. We need economies of care. what we call economies of communion. We need human sciences, social sciences, politics is caring for the common good. So this is real politics. So I would emphasize on these 2 points of providing a vision, a dream that inspire our youth are waiting for dreams. So if you don't provide, they look outside with celebrities or influencers, but they don't last, those influence. Though young people go up to them. As Tara was saying, why they go for social media, because they're looking for inspiration. So we need to be those people, especially we as on the faculty, along with the youth. And thank God, youth are dreaming, and sometimes in a much more creative way than we are. Thank God. And so dream together, and then insist not on caring, because I think I mentioned about our business schools, and we said those who earn the most, those who dominate and come first. And that's again, the wrong model. You have to come first and beat everyone, and winner takes it all. No, that's not caring. Caring, as Pope Francis is showing us, when you really come down, you need, as Pope Francis does, washing the feet as Jesus did. That is caring, and that is again the new paradigm we need, because unless we care, the world won't survive. We will be fighting against one another, and no one will survive. Whereas when we care, when we feed each other, when we nurture each other, when we nourish each other, we will all flourish together. And the only path is that of caring. Thank you.
Thank you. Tara, please.
Great. Thank you so much. That was so beautifully put, Father Josh. And I think this is such an interesting question. And I'd like to maybe start with saying that I think we need to do both. I think we do need to prepare people, our students, for the future, as well as prepare the future. And I say that because even if we reach net zero carbon emissions by mid-century, our climate will continue to change towards more extreme events, more intense hurricanes, more intense flooding, more drought, more wildfires, more extreme heat, which is the #1 killer of people from climate change related incidents. And all of these dangers in a world that's more populated. We're expected to have 2 billion more humans on the planet. And most of that population growth will happen in Asia and Africa, where climate threats will be more severe and where people have less capacity to adapt to those. So I think the world's going to become a harder place to make a living for people. And to ignore that is a disservice to our students, because they are really concerned about what the future challenges will be for them. And so I'll throw out an idea here. To prepare for a more populated and dangerous world, one way that universities can help do that is to provide new cooperative models of doing business. Very similar to what Father Josh was saying, businesses that care for their communities. And we can use nature as inspiration. So ecosystems in the early stages of succession go through lots of competition as new species arrive and they're competing for space and light and nutrients. Competition rules early development in ecosystems. But as ecosystems reach their climax community, when they're full and rich with species, mutualisms are the dominant ecological interaction in those systems. You can find mutualisms in tropical ecosystems that have evolved for over millions of years, like in the Attine ants that Edward Wilson has studied. They have incredible interactions with other species that allow them to persist, and they actually support vegetative growth in the forest. So just as one example of that, and it's a small one, a step towards cooperative models would be the B Corporation certification. This assesses companies' entire social and environmental performance. It includes the impact on workers, the community, the environment, and on the customers. And then a portion of the profits from that business go back to the community for causes or interests or needs of that community. So it's helping the health of the community, caring for the community, and then that community cares for that operation because it provides valuable employment for its citizens, a place worth working for and towards. That's one very small example, but we need a lot more models on cooperation rather than competition. If we're going to survive these challenges, we need to work together and really quickly. And if I don't convince you with that, let me just quote Wendell Berry, who in 1977 was watching the degradation, the deterioration of agricultural communities as they got bigger and corporations came in and bought land up. And so he writes in 1977, if a culture is to hope for any considerable longevity, then the relationships within it must, in recognition of their interdependence, be predominantly cooperative rather than competitive. A people cannot live long enough at each other's expense or at the expense of their cultural birthright, just as an agriculture cannot live long at the expense of its soil or its workforce. And just as in a natural system, the competitions among species must be limited if all are to survive. Let me answer the second part of your question, preparing the future. And I think that the university can prepare the future by bringing the whole of humanity to the table to answer that question. And that is that my response is only useful if it's in conversation with people from different racial and ethnic backgrounds and different lived cultural experiences. So universities need to reflect in its faculty and staff and its student body, the whole of humanity, so that we can build that vision of the future that Father Josh so eloquently spoke about together and make sure that our own biases don't dominate in that vision.
Thank you, Tara. I think that the last part of your intervention brought us to the heart of Laudato Si, which connects the social crisis and the ecological crisis. And I think that this is an element we will never forget after the Laudato Si. And thank you, Father Jostrom, for providing this vision of future, which is not only progress, but it has something to do with dreams and care. We don't usually, the mainstream doesn't usually compose care and future, and it's a beautiful inspiration for us. So I'd like to pose a last question from the 4 big questions we posed to all the panelists. Looking at your contexts, of course you work in different contexts. Father Jostrom, we know you also work in a university, but you also have a role in the dicastery. So what kind of work is emerging in your contexts, in your disciplines? Tara, you're working also in nutrition, agri-food system, which is such a universal issue. So maybe starting from Father Jostrom, what is changing? What work is emerging now in your context?
Yeah, thank you so much, Roberto. And also to conclude on the last question, it's on a very, very positive note. Like, as Tara also mentioned, we need to come together, and we are realizing, working at the Vatican, working along with Pope Francis, that we need to create a people's movement from below. That if Earth is our common home, if the ecological crisis is a crisis, a common home that affects everyone, present generations, but also future generations, human beings, but also non-human species, everyone, we need everyone also on board. Before I go to on the proposal we are working at, I would synthetically put it as we need to return to the land. And that also mentioned at the beginning. And I think of Genesis 3:19, when God tells Adam, until you return to the land, there's no salvation. Until you, and land is Adama, that is sacred. So first thing, we need earth-based thinking, earth-based sciences, earth-based living, return to the land, because we come from the land, and we will flourish only when we are rooted once again in the land. Second would be return to our brothers and sisters, and not very generally. I would say if we want to, as Tara was saying, embrace everyone, the only criterion is begin with the least. Otherwise, we'll never reach everyone. We will remain with the elite, and then we only say, like, if there's a touching stone is when we begin with the least, then all are included. And this is what Pope Francis is showing us, or Mother Teresa or St. Francis, because then you really embrace. Often what happens, the present economy or even our university system, unfortunately, very often only caters to the wealthy or to the elite, or Now we need to begin with the least, and that is an option or a preferential option, an obligation for Catholic universities to keep always the most vulnerable at the center, that Jesus did. And the third is, in all this, the spiritual dimension, return to the Creator. And I think of Pope Benedict, in 2006, the day he became Pope, during the homily, he said a phrase which Pope Francis quotes in Laudato Si, if I'm not mistaken, paragraph 217. Pope Francis said, the external deserts are growing because the internal deserts have become so vast. What Tara was saying, medieval and Tucker said, youth people are getting, discouraged and, because deluded, because they're missing the source of life. So if the deserts are growing outside, it's because deserts are growing within us, and that's where we need to return to the Creator. That was just a premise. Now the one thing I want to share with you is this movement of people from below. I just mentioned that. Then you can also find it on the Dicastery's website. Just put it on the Google Laudato Si Action Platform. We had a very special Laudato Si year announced by Pope Francis from 24th of May 2020 to 24th of May 2021, part of which was creating Laudato Si gardens. And I think of Bangladesh, where they planted 1 million trees, the Catholics, one for each Catholic, 2 for each Catholic, 2 trees, like that. But then at the end of the Laudato Si year, Pope Francis has launched the Laudato Si Action Platform, inviting families, parishes and dioceses, schools and universities. So we are there. Hospitals and healthcare centers, businesses and farms, groups, movements, and seventhly, religious orders, to begin a 7-year journey in which you become Laudato Si community, a Laudato Si community. So you become a Laudato Si university. There again, Pope Francis proposed 7 Laudato Si goals in the spirit of integral ecology, that we respond to the cry of the earth, cry of the poor, economics and lifestyles, education, spirituality, and we do all this as a community. So, and people are very much interested, and we hope this journey will start. And next year we want to invite a newer group who will do their 7-year journey. So we keep on growing exponentially till we reach the critical mass. And with that, I conclude. The sociologists tell us that transformations are possible, provided you reach the critical mass. And the good news is that the critical mass is not a very big number. If they say if you reach 3.5% of a group, we have the critical mass for transformation. I think universities need to lead this journey, inspiring students, as Tara said, not just within the university, but also the entire world, from all walks of life. So, but we can dream, we can inspire. And so we act, Laudato Si Action Platform, so that we become the change we want to see in the world, to quote Mahatma Gandhi. And on that note, I close. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Jostrom. Tara, in your work, in your context.
Yes, thank you for this question. I was really excited to hear at the beginning of this webinar the use of the word regeneration, because one of the exciting movements in agriculture is towards regenerative agriculture. That term's catching on like wildfire, and some people critique that there's not enough certification to make sure everyone's doing the practices of regenerative agriculture. But I think overall, it's leading agriculture in a really good direction. And by regenerative agriculture, that means to provide an agriculture that supports all life forms. So it's supporting the microbes in the soil and the earthworms and the insects and the birds that come to visit, while at the same time being productive and supporting the farm workers, giving them a living wage, while supporting the farm family and also the communities. So regenerative agriculture is a really exciting area of development. There's a book published by Mark Shepard on this topic. A mounting body of evidence within the field of agroecology has shown that polycultures, growing more than one crop, and when you add in perennial crops like orchard trees and bushes and riparian habitat, that system is actually a lot more productive than a monoculture. So there's one of the modernity myths that Pope Francis brings up in Laudato Si. One of them in my field would be that modern agriculture is the most productive. That's just not true. Monocultures do not outperform polycultures. What's more, when a polyculture system provides more job opportunities for people because there are more products being harvested throughout the year. So in traditional farming communities and countries, these are the systems that we need to preserve and create and not be seduced to go with corporate plantations of palm trees and big pastures or soybean to replace diverse polycultures. So that's something that we really need to work actively in. Another area that I think is really exciting is called regenerative marine permaculture. And if you'd like to read more, you might look up the Climate Foundation. Dr. Brian von Herzen is a scientist who developed these pumps that use wave energy, and it brings up nutrients from the bottom of the ocean floor to the surface. And they have submerged these circular platforms that are 25 meters below the surface of the ocean, and they're seeded with seaweed. The seaweed grows at a really fast rate, and then that's sequestering carbon. The seaweed can be harvested for food consumption, but what's really exciting, I think, about this is that it's also supporting the marine life. So herbivorous fish are coming to eat on the seaweed. Then predaceous fish start arriving to eat the other fish. In their pilot trials, they found that a great white shark was around the kelp platform within 2 weeks of it growing. Just to show that we can be feeding people and we can support our ecosystems. I find that incredibly exciting, and also be storing carbon and dealing with our nutrient runoff problems too.
Thank you very much, Tara. Thank you, Father Jostrom. We are a little bit close to the end of this webinar, so I will ask you a last question, but take the chance also with this last question to close your interventions, to leave us with the core message you want to leave in this webinar. So taking advantage of the presence of Father Jostrom, I would ask you, given that SACRU is an alliance of Catholic research universities, do you think that religious beliefs and spirituality have a specific role to play in how university tackle the socio-environmental crisis, and what would be this role? Thank you, Father Jostrom.
Yeah, thank you, Roberto. And very briefly, I do believe, and I quoted scientists who wrote to Pope Francis before Laudato Si came out, because we are realizing that scientific knowledge alone is not sufficient. I mean, we know these facts for several decades now. The climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis. I think the basic problem is because we look at the world through the eyes of modernity, as Sarah was saying, as nature. And modern. Think of Descartes, for example. The world is mechanistic, it's res extensa. There's no telos, there's nothing. It's just dead matter. Whereas nature is not dead. Nature is organic, is living. And faith perspectives give us a much deeper vision that nature is imbued with God's presence. Genesis 1:2 the Spirit of God hovered over the waters at the beginning of creation. I think like God told Moses, take off your sandals. We need to remind ourselves, earth is God's creation. And that's common to all the religions, not just Christianity. All the religions see earth as God's work, where God is present, not just created and left. God's Spirit is present. So I would say that will make a world of difference. And that's probably SACRU or Catholic universities can insist on that. In this connection, I also want to remind that on 4th of October, at the Vatican, there's going to be a meeting of all religious leaders around Pope Francis. It's also to support COP26 and COP15. But then religious leaders are going to come together on 4th of October, the Feast of St. Francis of Assisi, and remind, especially believers, that this is God's creation entrusted to our care. This is sacred, that we need to love it and protect it. And we will protect something only when we love it. And we will love it when we see something as precious, as a gift, as something sacred. So cannot agree more with you, and probably also an invitation to all of us to look at the natural world with deeper eyes, like poets do, like mystics do, like saints do. Like St. Francis of Assisi, seeing a butterfly or bird, he would begin to sing. And Laudato Si closes with, let's sing as we go. I mean, the challenge is huge. Time is running out, but I'm sure people are coming together and God's Holy Spirit is at work. And we are in this, on this beautiful earth, which is sacred. And let's, like St. Francis of Assisi, sing, rejoice as we go, not just we, but the entire university community, and together care, heal, rebuild our common home. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Jostrom. Tara, please.
Thank you so much. And that was so beautifully put, and probably should have been the very last words. I tend to think of these things from a practical point of view. I see universities as this great opportunity to use our campus to reflect Laudato Si principles. And I mentioned some of the things with green spaces, but there's a lot more that we can do in our building design to have renewable energy, especially when we build new buildings. We can be actually creating more energy from that building than the building uses and send that energy back into the grid. We can reclaim gray water and we can use that for our landscaping. We can direct our waste stream to compost and recycling. We can source foods from within our food shed that use sustainable agriculture and fair labor practices. Boston College, for example, participates in the New England Food Vision project, which is to reach 50% of food sourced locally within our food shed by 2060. Now, university budgets are limited, and it may not be possible to make all of these transformative changes over the next 9 years, which is that really critical decade that we have to make changes, just as David Orr and Oscar Mateos had mentioned in the first webinar. But American universities are using an interesting funding mechanism called green revolving funds. These are internal pools of money that fund sustainability measures on campus. And then any cost savings that come from those measures go back into that pool of money to fuel other sustainability measures. And one of the ones that this group will be interested in is at Georgetown University, because it's called the Laudato Si Fund. So it's also really important, I think, for us to keep in mind that our traditional return on investment model does not incorporate everything we've been talking about. It doesn't incorporate the positive impacts on biodiversity when we plant a botanical native garden or an arboretum. It doesn't incorporate the effects on our air, on our mental health. So just keep that in mind when we sometimes get very narrow focused on just the economics of those measures. It's all interconnected. We need to use an integral ecology approach to making these transformative changes. I just want to say thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure to to listen to Father Jostrom and to engage with him, and also with you, Roberto.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you very much. I would like to ask to Lilian if she would like to leave us with her words, because this is also the last seminar organized. So please, Lilian, if you want.
Yes, no, thank you, Roberto. It's hard to find a final message after everything that has been said during today's webinar. Father Josh and Tara's words, ideas, perspectives, I think have been very enlightening. But I would just like to be very strong in thanking the opportunity that gives us being part of a network, being part of a Catholic university network that allow us for the possibility for sharing these thoughts, for sharing what as Catholics we can share with the rest of the world, how we can integrate and not leaving anybody behind. I would say that we need to go into that direction. This webinar and the previous ones have incorporated people from non-Catholic universities. And I think that it has been very enriching. And the idea behind, of course, it is that we need to care for God's creation, as Father Josh was saying. And that is something that as Catholic universities, we really need to push forward. So thank you very much for this opportunity to listen to your words, and special thanks to Roman, who has been behind organizing these webinars, for Roberto for moderating it today, for Ramon Lul from our university, from Boston College, I mean, different universities that have been supporting these webinars that I think are going to enlighten our students and our faculty. There's so much work still need to be done. So let's keep the hard work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to everybody. And thank you, Lilian, Tara, Father Jostrom. Thank you, Roman, and all the organizers and the translators. I leave you with my invitation to watch and share on a YouTube platform this seminar together with the other two seminars. And to the next time. Thank you.
Thank you.